Hello, everyone. On behalf of Internet Society India Mumbai chapter, I welcome all to the fifth Women in Technology Leadership Webinar on the theme Protecting Children in an Online World. As the only all-women leadership-driven Internet Society chapter, we envision to create an empowered, innovative, and inclusive community that can leverage the power of existing and emerging Internet-based technologies to make an impact. Therefore, ISOC India Mumbai brings this special initiative, Women in Technology Leadership Series, to promote, celebrate, learn, and get inspired from women who are making a mark in technology leadership. In this fifth webinar of the series, we have a highly distinguished guest to discuss more on this topic of child safety online. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tamali Gupta, Principal TSG Legal Private Limited, and Independent Director on boards. A brief background about Dr. Gupta. Dr. Gupta has over 36 years of experience in law and has been an active voice for child safety, having served as a part of three-member expert group set up under the Ministry of Women and Child Development on child protection. She has also served as the board as a board director for many prominent organizations, including HFCL, SREI, IBA, Infrastructure Limited, Arya Hotels Private Limited, Sony Pictures Entertainment Films India, among others. Dr. Sen Gupta is a widely published author and has been invited speaker at CASPA, Fiki Frames, IBA, WCD, and India Today. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Gupta. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, it's a pleasure. The session will be moderated by Prateek, founding president and advisor to ISOC India Mumbai chapter. Prateek works in the business excellence team at Lakme, Unilever. He's a part government consultant, part lawyer, part talent manager, and part himself. When he's not busy digitally transforming the face of beauty and wellness sector, he volunteers with the chapter. Thanks, Prateek, for moderating this session, and floor is yours now.
Thank you, Nadita, for that kind introduction. In fact, do let me know who wrote that because it was fabulous. Maybe in future, if I ever need that introduction, probably I can take it from you. But coming back and now focusing on the event, it's as we are all aware, children form an integral part of our society. It is said that the way we influence the children of today is kind of the way we will eventually get the future of tomorrow. And today with us, we have Dr. Sen Gupta, who is a learned expert on this issue. So Dr. Sen Gupta, when we think about children per se, we wanted to understand as to if a child goes online, what are the kind of risks that, children will face? And, because of the recent lockdown, when, something like as regular as schools, which were traditionally considered to be offline engagement mechanism for, people to go to an offline school and talk there. Now with something even as basic as schools going online, a lot of children have now been brought online. So what are the primary risks that these children are facing now in this new online, according to you?
So, I'm not going to answer that question right away. So first, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking out the time to listen to this. This has been a very painful chapter of my professional career. I'm primarily a corporate lawyer, but about 20 years ago, I started working on child rights, mostly because I felt I should use my background in law and in public policy to help a segment which does not have politicians to represent them.
Okay, because that's very interesting.
People can approach through the political system for almost every group, and that's the noise we hear around us, whether it is the farmers' agitation or CAA or whether the dam protests or whatever. That is all part of the political process. But there are very large chunks of our population. Remember, our population is, I think, at least 50% would be under 20. I don't have the exact figures, but we are the youngest nation in the world, possibly. So I'll get to what. So I've been doing mostly law, legal and regulatory for many multinational corporations. So I've represented Sony Pictures out of the US, Times Warner, Sun Life of Canada, and various other corporate groups. However, when I took over as president of Rotary Club of Delhi Midwest, I did a booklet, which was like a self-help kind of thing for people, that when they're in problems, what to do if you witness a crime, what to do if you're a victim of a crime. There are some very basic things. You should actually go first to the police station because there are evidentiary issues which get wiped out. So if you are a victim of a crime and you don't go to the police station, then later on there'll be questions about the authenticity of what has happened to you. So, and when you go to a hospital, it becomes a medical legal case, and again there's police involvement. So when I did this, it was just me trying to use my training to help a segment of society. Then I gave copies of this to all the doctors, and I started getting referrals from them on child abuse. So basically, victims of child abuse who had reached out to the doctor. And, initially I was very shocked and very upset and very sad and all that. And then I started doing whatever I could, which is organizing legal help, talking to Mr. K.K. Manan, was then president of the Bar Council of Delhi, talking to people and getting a legal system set up for redressing the crime. It is not about crime prevention, it was about redressing. In the process, what I found is that it was quite difficult. Families were resistant in spite of everything that the law offers. There were certain specific provisions that were coming in the way. Now, the 377 debate was going on then about unnatural offenses. And the entire, what would you call it, homosexual community was up in arms saying, strike out section 377. But 377 doesn't cover it covers unnatural activities, which includes any form of abuse of humans, adults, children, and animals. So it would prevent, it is the only section that would then be used to cover, for instance, assault on dogs or on monkeys, which we have seen in recent times. These reports have come out about people raping these categories. So it's a very troubling area, and it challenges all your notions of society, goodness, God, what is the nature of human beings, etc. And so I started a public policy effort completely pro bono. I worked with the government of India. Lavleen Kakkar was then the joint secretary. And I did 2 studies for them. One was on the existing, first, the Goa Children's Act had come out. This is all around 2004-05. The Goa Children's Act, the efficacy of the Goa Children's Act, what were the flaws and what were the defects. That was the first Children's Right Protection Act. At the same time, the UK came out with the Child Right Protection Act, which covered a much wider gamut. So it covered sexual offenses, physical offenses, emotional abuse, and it covered what is called grooming. So, so I did a draft for the government covering all the factors covered in the Goa Act, the UK Act, and the addressing the deficiencies that the way I saw it in them. So the government went ahead and set up a 3-member committee with Prayas. Prayas was our partner in this. Amod Kant was there. And we trained some 1,500 interviewers to talk to children. So they interviewed 15,000 children. And the results were absolutely terrifying because I think some 5,000 of the 15,000 children wanted to be rescued from what is Indian childhood. So there could be different forms of abuse, physical, mental, whatever, but they just were begging the interviewers, please take us out of our current situation, home or otherwise, and protect us, save us. When this happened, we had to actually modify the interviewer's mandate and tell them no matter what they tell you, please don't show any surprise, and do not make statements saying like this is wrong or this is bad. Or, what do you mean your uncle comes and locks you up in a dark room? Because we cannot take the children out. There is no home large enough to house 5,000 children. And we can't protect them. They will go back to the same situation of abuse, now knowing it's wrong. So earlier they didn't know it's wrong, they accepted it. Now they know it's an offense, they know it's a crime, and there is no one to protect them. So the government of India balked at the thought of 5,000 children wanting to be rescued. Now you take the larger numbers of the country, 1.3 billion people, and so many children, and you will get an idea of the kind of magnitude of trauma Indian children are under. To cut a long story short, the findings of our study is 30%, 33%, one third of all the children interviewed reported cases of abuse in some form or the other. So this was naturally very shattering, and I would go into parties and I would look at the people there, the men and the women, and think, oh my God, 1 out of 3 has been a victim of some sort of crime. And that's the society we live in. And then we justify it in different ways. Some communities are entitled to do this, others are not entitled to do this. It's just all different forms of patriarchy, misogyny, and entitlement. And men are as much victims of this as women are. The only difference is that the men don't talk about it. The men don't talk about it. Even those who are the victims are perceived as extremely weak if they talk about it. And they just pass it off as one of the, rites of passage or whatever you call it. But so now to get from here, so to this point, this eventually the government put together, after I sent a draft, they put together various formulations, and they realized that touching on areas like grooming and wider area of abuse is not acceptable in India. So they focused only on child sexual abuse, which they felt people cannot object to so much. So that resulted eventually in the POSCO. They talked with other NGOs, and we had some sessions where all the NGOs came together and analyzed the provisions clause by clause by clause by clause. But bottom line is there is a huge gap in grooming. There is a huge gap in physical abuse. There is a huge gap in emotional abuse. All of these are cognizable offenses in other countries, but in India, children belong to their parents and their community, and not to India. In the Western concept, children belong to one is talking about it. Every other day we get images saying that some child vanished while returning from school, and nobody is talking about it. They are just, you have people like Salam Balak Trust who spend all their time in the railway station. When children run away from abusive homes all over North India, they come to Delhi, and in Maharashtra, they go to Bombay, and a lot of them end up in Goa. So they leave their homes in search of a safer, better environment, and they end up in the clutches of traffickers. Many of the girls are lured out of their homes. In a protective home, it's difficult to get access to the daughters of a house unless they come out on their own. So you have a whole category of what they call the Rajus in the trafficking system, who are basically clean-cut, handsome young men whose job is to seduce young women to leave their home. Once they leave their home, they can be coerced into prostitution. This new movie, Gangubai Kathiawadi, shows the whole process. And the girls who are under risk in that are between 13 to 18, because they are codependent, they are submissive mostly, and they have no legal rights. As children, they have no legal rights. So it's very easy to victimize these. Now, the role of internet comes into all of this. You have this whole concept of BharatNet, which is coming up. 250,000 villages, panchayats will get internet in within defined time frame. So the government has already announced they will spend 80,000 crores on setting up the cable network infrastructure for this. So we have children in villages who have been raised on the Ji Haji culture. Whatever your parents say, you say Ji Haji. And whatever adults say, you listen to them. And there is God, and God will protect you. And then suddenly you have the internet, you have challenges like blue whale, you have one of the reasons physiologically why there's a difference between children and adults is that physiologically children are unable to resist mimicry and impulsivity. So one of the signs of growing up is that you are able to resist mimicry of others and impulsivity. So if someone tells you to jump off a bridge, you won't. Similarly, if someone tells you take off your clothes, you won't. So all these impulses are supposed to kick in around 18. Till 18, children just imitate. So you tell them to do something, they copy that. You speak to them, they try to speak in the same language. So now you have homes all over India where the front door is locked to keep the children safe. And then you have a super highway of information which is coming to them in the form of their phones. And, school information is on the phone, 4 to 5, they are spending 4 to 5 hours a day on devices of different sorts, if they have access to devices. And in the process, there is that whole dopamine reaction where they begin to associate happiness with online time. So I think there are studies on this. It almost acts like electric impulses in the brain, which give you a feeling of satiety. And in the process, children will be persuaded to do many things. One is meet people from outside. 2 is give out details of their personal whereabouts. 3 is create video content in a form of mimicry at the request of outsiders. 4 is, so they become very vulnerable to trafficking networks. They become vulnerable to exploitation, kidnapping, and eventually, of course, entry into prostitution or however put it. And then we have a generation of parents who do not understand the risk. So if you understand the risk, I mean, the CUPS in Haryana did a very simple thing. They said no girls are allowed to use mobile phones. So in this way, they felt that, okay, we can protect our girls. They will not become too azad. But equally, they are also getting deprived of educational opportunities, number 1. Number 2 is, of course, the whole issue of feminism and women's right to access technology and all that. So it's a very fine balancing line, and it's very difficult to make any clear-cut value judgments. I myself have 2 adult daughters. They are now 29 and 25. And when they were children, we lived in Delhi when Nirbhaya happened. And as a parent, I was terrified. So, they've grown up under a level of scrutiny with us watching their every movement, which would not have been the case if we had lived in any other city. But because we live in Delhi and such a terrible thing did happen, one was extra cautious. The solution for us is, of course, put them on the internet, and at least they're in their rooms watching internet instead of roaming around on the streets, experiencing real life joys and horrors, whatever they may be. So, so it's a very complicated act. It's very difficult to say what is the right what do you mean? She said, because it's a baby, you want to hold it, but it's dead, so you can't hold it. You can't throw it away because it's still a baby. So this woman who went through some pretty bad abuse as a child said that you will spend your life holding on to that dead child. And, this was such a graphic explanation. It left me quite shattered. And maybe they say secondhand smoke is more noxious than the first. So maybe because in hearing these things, you feel much worse because it challenges your entire concept of what is good and what is bad, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, especially since in religious terms, many forms of offenses against women, children, and people of oppressed communities have not just been allowed, they've been encouraged. So to say what is good and bad becomes increasingly difficult. It's like, are you attacking your own people? Are you saying that, I'll give you a simple example. Dev Dasis was a system where small girls were married to the god. If you watch this movie, Sham Singaroy, which is on Netflix, you will see what married to the god entails. Now, there were children born of these unions. These children were of mixed parentage, and they would not necessarily like to accept that they are products of rape in a system of entitlement where certain men have the right to rape and others had the right to send their daughters for rape. So it's complicated. It strikes at the core of what is good, what is bad, what is Hindu, what is Muslim, what is Christians have much less of all of this, but between Hindus and Muslims, I think we can trade off pretty much on these are ancient religions where the concepts 2,000, 5,000 years ago were very different from what it is today. And many of us growing up in urban India with a very strong influence of international Jesuit culture, etc., don't really understand how these things can be realities. But they are reality, and they still continue to be reality in many parts of the country. The only consolation, for instance, for me is India's changing. The concept of what is Hindu is changing. Hopefully, the concept of what is Muslim will also change. And eventually, we will have a more rational, reasonable, and protective society for children. But the important thing at this time is with BharatNet, with the SuperNet sort of super information highway reaching all the homes in India, how do you protect children from this massive octopus of exploitation which will come at them from every side? Is it by giving information to the children? Is it by giving information to the parents? Is it by denying access? Is it by doing limited access? So the government at one stage wanted to do an alternative.
Or is it by doing qualified access? The way YouTube has, parental guidelines or child guidelines in the place. So, if something like that also can be done.
When the parents are not literate, how do you do parental guidelines? In 90% of the homes that I've seen, the parents are completely illiterate, and the children are the only ones who understand technology at all.
That's where, somewhere, Dr. Singh Gupta, that's what also we were thinking. So you very beautifully articulated the role of a parent, in the kind of dilemmas that a parent faces, while kind of protecting his child. And even, broadly, you have also hinted at the role that the state can possibly take over, in protecting child rights. But there are other stakeholders as well. So, for example, say you have a school, you have different communities. Communities can be based on religion, they can be based on university networks, they can be based on trade networks. So, if you can also, in your conversation also, but highlight as to how, say, the non-state actors, in excluding parents, but say schools, associations, trade networks, or religious networks, what roles can they now play in protecting child rights?
So one of the troubling things, watching young children today is there's been a massive increase in bullying. There's been a massive increase in bullying, online bullying through social media, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever. And this is affecting all the boys and the girls. They had this recent incident in my nephew's school where some very abusive comments were put regarding one particular girl on Instagram, and then they needed to get to the bottom of it, and that. So the schools are doing their best, but understand, school teachers mostly are people with very good intentions. Very good intentions. They have innocent hearts. They have good intentions, most of them, but they do not have the training to tackle difficult issues of law and order. Now, we face this all the time, because when we talk, I remember in my children's school, they did a talk on sex education, and there were some parents, and this is like one of the top, private schools in Delhi. And after that, the parents came very upset to the principal. They said, "How could you tell our children how children are born?" So the principal is like, "But they are 13 years old. I don't control biology. It happens." And the parents are like, "No, but we have told our children that God gives babies, and within a certain framework, and you have now told them all these facts, and we are getting questioned." So even a simple thing like sex education is not without its complexity. The teachers do the best they can. I have full sympathy for their efforts, because they are on the front line. They are on the front line of detecting abuse. They are on the front line of understanding of what's happening, especially now with this EWS quota. They have even bigger problems, because these children come from orphanages, they come from all over, and then integrating them into a society is where, for example, one of the things I witnessed is I'd gone to meet one of the school principals once, and she was very angry, because there was a little girl who was being bullied by a boy in the school bus. And what was the context of bullying? That this girl had lost her father. So this boy told her, they were all like 12-ish, that tera to baap nahi hai, tu kya kar legi mujhe.
Oh my.
So the thing is, so the thing
Delhi
is
mein mera
that
baap
this is,
kaun hai works very importantly, so I understand it comes in that context probably.
so the thing is that there is a basic concept of respect for others, and is not there, number one. Number two is Indian mothers are not helping by singing songs like Chanda Hai Tu, Mera Suraj Hai Tu, because young men are growing up with a hugely inflated sense of self-importance. It's a problem. I don't know what the solutions are. One solution is to keep women safe. The other solution is to sensitize parents and children. As far as outsiders go, it is very, very difficult as an outsider, as a lawyer, or as you're in, ISOC or anybody else, to walk into somebody's home and tell them what to do with their children. Okay? Unless the child sort of goes into the public space of protection of juvenile justice homes or orphanages, you have no role. You cannot go to anybody's house and tell them what to do. So it's a complex area. I have no solutions, but I think a lot of companies are working on solutions. Google certainly has a very wide suite of products for protection of children.
For the children, yeah.
I think Pavni Divanji, who is a very close friend of mine, who was heading that division at one time. But the thing is that Indian reality is different, because as I told you, most of the parents are illiterate, and they are in no position to impose parental controls. So limited access, qualified access to education and certain kinds of entertainment are an option. But equally, then the question becomes, what are they permitted to watch? Are they permitted to watch right wing, of left wing, of freedom of speech? Which spectrum of thought control are they allowed to escape? Because
and then the next thought is always, how do you define a right wing and a left wing? Because what might be right for someone might be left for someone who is on a far right spectrum.
That's correct. And also, we are born from a certain process We are born from a certain process where babies come into this earth, whether it's a physical process or a spiritual process, a different thing. Then we give it a lot of names in a lot of languages. Okay, so ultimately it comes down to language control. Do you say God? Do you say Bhagwan? Do you say Allah? Do you say Bhagavan? Do you say Bade Baba? So it's coming down to language control, that you will control the language in which your children will think. And that will make them follow a certain set of rules vis-a-vis, whatever. So it's a complex area. So anyway, Nandita has just sent me a message saying we're moving to question and answer. I'm not trying to give any solutions here. I'm just outlining the problem as somebody who's been thinking about this area for 20, 25 years. I am by no means on the front line. Because I have friends on the front line who go into brothels at night to rescue girls from trafficking. I am not among them. I'm only in the intellectual, legal and policy space.
Yes, ma'am. So just one thing, Nadita has written, we will move in soon. She's not saying that we've moved in now. So we still have some time here. But, one thing I wanted to understand, now again from an intellectual policy and a legal space, you have been looking at child rights, I'm assuming from in India's jurisdiction as well as, from other jurisdictions. Do you think at a fundamental level, say probably at a jurisprudence level, if I might say, is there a need to rethink the way we think about child rights in an online age? Or do the basics still remain the same? What do you think about this?
There is. There was a case in the United States, in New York specifically, where this child was kept chained by her guardians. I don't know if they were parents or other kinds of guardians. She was kept chained to a bed for days on end. And, people could see from, I think it was in a basement, and people could see what was happening. They could hear her crying. And they went to the authorities and said, someone has to do something to protect this child. And there was no provision of law in the United States to rescue that child, except the SPCA Act, so which says Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. So they took the view that a human child is also an animal. And therefore, the federal agents went into the space and rescued the child. So what I'm saying is that it's not as if Western societies have been so far ahead all the time, but they have worked on it certainly a lot more. The confusion in India is at the confluence of three different cultures, which is, of course, there is the Western, highly patriarchal, misogynistic culture. There is the Eastern, more
community or family-oriented cultures comparatively as compared to the Western. Not much individualistic.
It comes from the Buddhist background where children were part of a commune. They were raised by the community. They were the children of the community. They were not the children of one man. So there are very different approaches. And then there is South, which is more Dravidian and much more ancient. South Indian culture goes back 5,000, 5,500 years, predates both Islam and Christianity. And they have their own approaches and their own thing. So unfortunately, when they did the codification of Hindu law 1950 to 55, they swept all these differences under the carpet. So they put in one single clause, which is subject to customary practice. Now that subject to customary practice allows a lot of different kinds of things to happen. So as long as if any questions are raised, if you can just show that you have something like this happened within the last 100 years, which was accepted, then you are within customary law. So it's a complex area, and different concepts of what is Hindu is different from Delhi to Bombay to. I have a lot of friends in Bombay, and they're all extremely South Bombay liberal. They're always very vocal about this, that, and the other. And I have told some of them, if you come down to the ground floor level, forget about going out of the city, come to the ground floor level and see what's happening on the ground before you start waxing eloquent. Sometimes the way they'll talk is similar to what non-resident Indians are. They'll all be like, this has happened in India, it is terrible, I'm so ashamed I'm of Indian origin. You live in Canada, you live in the US, you are enjoying the level of social and structural stability provided in those societies, but you're very ashamed of your roots. So you should come back here and help to create that system here. That's my view. This is why I came back. I lived in the US, I had a green card, I was there 5 years. I came back to India because I wanted to contribute to the development of this country. Very specifically, this country. Not that I've done, as much as I could have, but I've done my bit. I've done my bit in the areas that are not popular, in the areas where there are no votes to be gained, where there is no money to be gained, but there is need for work. There's need for warriors for the truth, which is everybody is entitled to a level of protection and humanity. So that's it. I still don't know the solutions. What do you do about Grant Road? What do you do about Kamtipura? What do you do about GB Road in Delhi? How do you address all these issues? I don't know what the solutions are.
No, I understand it's a very complex space, but if you want to start thinking, so international organizations, for example, say ISOC, ICANN, and if these IG-based organizations, who completely acknowledge the fact that it is a very complex situation, but if we want to start thinking, what do you think can be right? What can be that right set of initial thoughts, or that first step of initial mechanisms which we can go through, before we start embarking on this complex concept, especially from a perspective of international internet governance organizations like ICANN, ISOC. What can they do, to at least take the right steps in this direction?
So, in my view, India is not ready for free speech. Okay, we are not ready for free speech because the ramifications are too much. So, I believe that when they do this BharatNet, which everybody knows about, what people are not prepared is for the blue whale reaching every single village in the country. If you remember the Shaktiman, the TV serial came Shaktiman, and children were jumping off.
Yes, the buildings and terraces and
the umbrellas, thinking that Shaktiman will save them. So the thing is that children are impressionable. As I said, mimicry. They're impressionable. They're subject to mimicry. They're subject to flattery, and they're subject to imitation. So they should not be exposed to harmful practices like cutting off your oxygen in a plastic bag, which happened in the US. So many children died from putting plastic bags around their faces and trying to choke themselves to experience a euphoric state pre-death, something along those lines, I believe. These are all documented on, if you Google, you'll find how. But the basic thing is that when you are a family person who is trying to protect your own children, and you are a good person who's trying to protect everyone, you don't think with the mind of someone who's on the dark web. Ultimately, without the provocation and without knowing what other people want, you cannot protect their victims. So
I think probably a deeper understanding of dark web actors, because internet organizations like ISOC and ICANN deal with stakeholders, and especially dark web actors are also one of these stakeholders. Probably some understanding on their motives, their behavioral patterns can be an interesting starting point for actors like ISOC and ICANN to eventually step into this space and then probably contribute to it in a positive and a transformative manner. I think that's what broadly you are referring to. That's what I'm.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that the whole of religion and society is about the fact that humans are intrinsically good and do not want to harm others. That may or may not be true. So if that is the case, then we need to understand what are the baser instincts that are making people do these terrible things. Okay. Now, the only people putting the information out there today are the filmmakers, because the filmmakers are creating films on all of these things, and they're putting in the entertainment format, which is acceptable. News media reports things in a very sensational manner, which is designed to cause anxiety and stress without offering any solutions. So the objective is keep people agitated always, and they will keep watching your whatever, Arnab Goswami or whoever the other person is. And every editor of every news channel you will talk to will tell you that they keep a couple of sensational stories in their pocket. And the moment they see their TRP's ratings drop, they put out the, whatever, the dynamite. So they create it, they find it, they do whatever, and they stay for when their ratings, when they are not being watched so much. So, these are all businesses and they are games, and we're subject to many levels of thought conditioning. And the moment you have internet, you are subject to a free for all, freedom of speech type environment where everybody can act every form. So, to prepare for that, I would, if I were in charge, which I'm not quite clearly, I would definitely want conditional access for BharatNet initially, until the population is more mature in its thought process. And the reason is it's basically because when you have such a large illiterate population and you have children who are very quick at picking things up, you don't know what the fallout will be. So it is better to have a gradual phased approach to the content that is exposed. I'm not talking about controlling content totally eventually. I'm saying let the population get more mature. I mean, it's like you don't give a toddler a Ferrari. Okay, he's better to walk.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Don't put the car seat with the car keys. So for the same reason, they'll have to watch this carefully. Otherwise, there will be an explosion of crime. There'll be an explosion of stalking. There'll be an explosion of child trafficking. There'll be explosion of organ removal. There'll be a lot of nasty things happening. And then, what can you do? I mean, police state is maybe the only answer. Have CCTV. New York was a terrible city till they put CCTV on every single street. Now it's the safest city in the world. So maybe you need to have CCTV everywhere because people need to be under surveillance. Who knows? So this is all very, Big Brother is watching you, 1984
type. 1984 type of thing that you're talking about. Very Orwellian notion of a state in which, kind of information is controlled and then given to people over a period of time, depending on their ability to adjust to it and, take it into consideration.
So I'm not suggesting this from a right wing, from a political or a religious thought process. I'm just suggesting this from the process of protecting children from exploitation. So whether it is networks trying to get little boys to sign up to be film stars and then send them to Dubai to scream till a camel shoots you to your death, or whatever the reasons may be, we need to get to the bottom of what is child exploitation in India. There is no definition just now. We have all kinds of definitions, all sorts of ages of consent, and there are all kinds of interpretations of what is religious law, what is customary, what is... So, they need to have some sort of a level playing field, and government has to be ready to step in to protect children when they have to. Some of these religious places, they chain children with mental illnesses to trees for months because they will be healed. Is this not a form of abuse? Why don't you send them back to a psychiatrist or send them to an institution to see if they can actually be helped? So there are many things we take for granted. That aise hi hota hai. Indian parents beat their children. This is normal part of growing up. So those who have not been...
spoiled the child has been a very famous adage here, in India and elsewhere as well. So
when my parents' generation was growing up, caning was normal. My grandfather kept a cane. He had 3 sons. Every time somebody misbehaved, he would call them to his study and say, bend over and whack them. That was normal. That was normalized. That is how children were raised. So, we've not necessarily... So, this has been very free-flowing and lots of things.
Yeah, so we'll take now a few questions. Yeah, we'll take a few questions if there are any. Nadita, would you like to...
thank you, Prateek, and thank you, Dr. Gupta, for it. So, does anybody have any questions here? I know the conversation has been so engrossing and it's so conversational. So, I'm sure there must be more so busy consuming the entire information. I'm not sure how many questions are gonna be there because it was
Actually,
such an
me and
exciting
Dr.
discussion.
Gupta covered a lot of things, in the
Yeah,
process,
yeah.
right from,
So,
religions to communities to, what different cities
so
are
there is a
working on.
lot of consumption of information at the moment.
So
So
I have one question, Nadita, if I can just come in here,
sure,
again,
sure.
for the sake of time. Dr. Gupta, I'm just now trying to think like a policymaker. You have now given a principle for us that you should have qualified access to information. So what should I as a policymaker do? Should I devise an aptitude test for kids, and when they get a particular high score, only they will then be given access to certain information? So if I'm just trying to kind of implement what you have proposed as a principle, do you have any interesting forms of implementation of this exercise, like the one
So,
like uh,
Gauri was the principal of Sanskriti school, and so she had a very simple way, like when the way she would teach children about child abuse, she would be like, well, if any parts of your body that are covered by a swimsuit, if anyone tries to touch them, you need to immediately tell an adult, right? So there are some simple principles which the schools follow, and I think it would be very important to pull the schools into this. Pull the schools into this. Pull schools like DPS, which have a high tech component, or any other schools like that, and have experts working on what you can do to protect the children. Because otherwise, most of the hacks, most of tech is about hacks. How do you create a hack to get out of some situation? Not so much of it is on the protection part. It's like, okay, how do you bypass this? How do you get in through the back door? And that's exactly what the risk is. That's exactly what the risk is.
That's very helpful.
Yeah. But maybe start the process, have a policy paper, take people's views on it. What are their suggestions? Because this process with COVID has run away from us, because already a lot of things have gone online without any thought on these aspects. But it's a matter of time as the immediate fear of the infection goes. But people are already online. The scams on the internet will show that scams are far behind. Every other day I get a call from my bank saying that, oh, be careful of this, be careful of that. But it doesn't take that much, it doesn't take that much effort for people to follow, to find, as I said, a hack around what is good otherwise. So yeah, maybe it's time for the techies to start the discussion. I know that companies like Google and Facebook and all are already actively thinking about this aspect. The way they do it in the US is they actually have police officers who are masquerading as traffickers, who go on internet and try to persuade children to leave their houses and meet them outside the home. And when the child comes, they take the child back to the parents and say, this is what your child has been up to.
Very interesting. But
so
a
that
very different way of doing it.
And then tell people, if you're a 14-year-old girl and there is a 14-year-old boy who's very cute flirting with you, it doesn't mean he's a 14-year-old boy. It could just be a picture. It could be anyone. So they are, I think, more advanced in this, and Delhi police is pretty good, by the way, because whenever they've been stalking things, they act almost immediately. Phone stalking and all, do the best they can. I can't really say that they're, but just as in, for example, in intellectual property rights, you've had special cells created to sensitize the police to intellectual property rights, and so they know Anton Pillar order. They know how to do it. Not all the policemen know, but they have special cells. So maybe sensitizing the police is one way.
So I think we have a very interesting message here from one of our frontline workers. So Shweta was also a former president and currently an advisor. She's also a principal for a particular school. And I think probably in this information, we have, kind of spoken a lot of information. She is asking, whether there is any specific message, you know, probably with regards to sensitization as you're talking, that teachers and, educational administrators can possibly keep in mind, when they're dealing with these child right issues in online world.
So, I've come into this I'm not giving solutions here.
Yeah.
Just putting
as in, what are your thoughts? Yeah. What are your thoughts? What is your perspective?
Because these are not subjects people think about.
That's true.
They don't think about it. They spend a lot of time thinking about Hanumanji. I've heard people saying Hanumanji, abhi yahan tapak ke ye issue ko theek kar denge. But so get practical. Hanumanji has enough work. I have the greatest respect for him. He has enough work to do in the universe keeping it safe. You deal with the problem.
No children.
Huh?
At the end of it, he didn't have children in a technical sense. Yeah.
Precisely.
No, he had, but let's not get into that.
Then we're getting into a different story, but yeah, broadly.
Bottom line is that if you don't understand the cause for provocation and you don't understand the gains from a particular set of behavior, how can you understand how to protect people from it?
So I think broadly, Ms. Sen Gupta, what you're hinting at is this topic is right now, there is need for more awareness and acknowledgement of issues. We are still in that phase. Once, we are more aware and, we kind of acknowledge the variety of issues therein, then somewhere, we can move on a deliberation or a policy solution phase wherein we know certain things can be devised. But as of now, at a community level, we need to still work on, increasing awareness of these issues and, trying to understand the myriad forms in which, these problems occur, in today's age.
So that's one of the things. The other thing is it's a many-headed hydra. You cut off one head, another one pops up. So it's an ongoing process. Maybe you need to, as I said, work with the government, work with women and child development, work with the police to have methods to track it down. Right now, in some areas, police are hand in glove. In other areas, they're helping. There is no societal condemnation of trafficking. Okay? If there was societal condemnation of trafficking, they would do something about the red light areas. But they're too scared that if you mess with the red light areas, crime will spill over on the streets.
Yes.
Right? Very easy to say, okay, all the crime is in the red light area. It's a bad place. Good people shouldn't go there. So this wider thing is it's difficult. I'm not even pretending to have solutions. I have thought at depth about it. I have not come out with any solutions, but people need to put their personal beliefs, their personal biases aside to protect children. That is the humanitarian cause. The cause is that you have to protect children till they are old enough to understand the consequences of their actions. The DPS, the MMS case, all of these are putting children at risk. They are getting into, how do you live your life after that? I think that poor child migrated to another country and all that, but those are the only solutions that are there. But that's still not going to address the fact that a child will be subject to imitation and flattery and impulsivity. So maybe teaching children that you are subject to these things and therefore you should be extra careful is the solution. This is not my realm. This is child psychology. Child psychology would say sit with child psychologists and educationists and work out the best way to protect them from trafficking, whether it is for sexual trafficking or kidnapping or organ donation, whatever it is. It doesn't.
So just to add here, probably for Shweta and others, broadly what Ms. Sen Gupta is hinting is, because this is a hydra-headed problem per se, we will need a multi-pronged solution to it. And probably, school teachers have to work with psychiatrists and, probably other law enforcement agencies to at least first acknowledge the problem, understand the problem, and then probably have a customized solution to, to some extent, probably not eliminate the problem because the problem is too complex to be eliminated right away. But, at least take steps to probably reduce the incidences of this problem. over a period of time. But thank you. And anything else, Dr. Gupta, any final thoughts on this before we move on?
Just look up the crime statistics of your city and see how many children are going missing every year. And then ask yourself the question, where are these children going? It's as simple as that. Look up your own city, see how many children are going missing, and then try to figure out where those children are. Male, female, it's, both categories. So this is a criminal law issue. It is not separate from the internet. Internet is simply a delivery mechanism for prospecting children for criminal activities, which is going to reach them very easily. It's not a separate thing. It's how networks will get through to children, how they will get access.
That's true.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gupta. That has been very insightful. And Nandita, if you can.
Yes, thank you, Prateek. Thank you, Dr. Gupta. And I guess we really ended on a very profound note. So, Dr. Gupta, it was an extremely information session. And I would like to begin by thanking you for taking time out on a weekend to talk on this highly relevant issue. As you said, it's actually a criminal issue, and internet is where the role of internet is very important in this section. Thank you, Jolly, for live streaming this event, 210 chapters across 6 continents. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Prateek for effectively moderating this session. Thanks to the design team for their designing efforts and creating such vibrant creative for this session. A big thank you to everyone who attended this session and live in the discussion with their thoughts and inputs. And last but not the least, I would like to thank the outgoing members of the leadership team, Shweta, who's there, and Firoza, who unfortunately couldn't be there, and new incoming chapter leaders, Premada, Nupur, and Juhi, for their support to this event. With this, we have come to an end to a very special webinar, and I would request everyone, if possible, to switch on their cameras for a click. All those who can, it would be great. All those who cannot, it's okay. I mean, we understand. So just a click.
Just one thing, before we click, Nadita, Dr. Gupta, I think this discussion was profound, and probably we might need more sessions in future to probably cover this range of topic, because what we realized from this session is we were just probably not even touching the tip of the iceberg here per se. This is a very profound discussion, and maybe we'll go back and think about it, as to how we can in some or the other way, probably contribute to this topic in the future.
So on this, I'll just click 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, everyone. And with this, we finally close this session. So thank you, everyone. And I'll just